Hey guys, welcome back to We're Talking Movies. This is Cade, joined by Andrew, and for today's episode, we are going to be ranking our top five worst horror remakes. Andrew, looking through all the movies that we have on our list here, are any of these at least entertainingly bad for you on some level?
Yes, the number five on our list is entertainingly bad to the point that I don't even consider it a horror movie. I consider it a comedy. And it is a movie that has and will forever live in internet infamy for many meme worthy moments.
Yes, for sure. And with that, let's jump right into it. Coming in at number five on our list is going to be The Wicker Man from 2006, a movie that we've already reviewed. And now the reason that we put it at number five, just like we mentioned, is because this one's probably the most entertaining to watch. You know, if you watch it, you just want to watch something to just have a guilty pleasure. This one probably works best as a guilty pleasure. And I think that's why it needs to be at number five.
Yes, this is a terrible horror movie with terrible writing and terrible acting, but as a comedy, it is utter brilliance. It's a terrible movie, especially compared to the original Wicker Man with Christopher Lee, which is in itself a very effective horror movie. It still holds up very well, but this is an art in so bad it's good.
And actually, fun fact about the original, Nicolas Cage was a really big fan of that movie, and it was something he was really passionate about when he signed on to not just star in the movie, but also produce it. You know, he wanted to make a very disturbing horror film. And to be fair, Andrew, like we were saying, how it's comedy gold, I mean, it really is. And a lot of that comes from Nicolas Cage, if you think about it. You know, there's the scene where he's shouting, "How to get burned! How to get burned! How to get burned! How to get burned!" Or the scene with the bees where he's just going, "No, no, not the bees! My eyes!" Or when he points the gun going, "Get off the bike."
The fact that they were trying clearly so hard to make a horror movie is kind of sad, but also kind of hilarious in its own right. And then it comes out and everybody just dog piles on it for decades until it finally comes full circle and everybody just realizes this is a brilliant comedy.
But looking past that, as a movie, yeah, it does fail on a lot of levels. And one of my biggest gripes with the story of this movie is how it changes the cult's methods for making his character a sacrifice. Because in the original film, while he was searching for this girl, the cult was studying him to make sure that he was a worthy sacrifice. But meanwhile, in this, they make it that they need someone blood related to someone on the island, which is why they create this whole story about his daughter being missing. And, you know, I brought this up in our review. If they always knew that he was a worthy sacrifice, then why did they need to send him on this wild goose chase? Why didn't they just trap him somewhere once he finally got to the island and just keep him there until they eventually needed to sacrifice him on the day?
Yeah, that's a pretty big plot hole that also leads to one of the not accidentally hilariously brilliant moments. There is just a lot of very long shots of just Nicolas Cage walking or biking through the woods. It happens a lot in this movie, and it's boring and not entertaining and not even shot that well.
Yeah, and you know what? Let's not forget about the truck accident that keeps getting referenced in this movie.
Oh yeah, the truck accident that they spent quite a bit of time referring to and Nicolas Cage thinking about, but really doesn't have any impact on the plot.
No, it's just this random thing that happens at the beginning of the movie, and they just keep cutting back to it in a bunch of different scenes, even though it has absolutely nothing to do with the mystery.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, and also, this movie is a great example, and so are some of the other ones on our list, of characters making stupid decisions. And what I mean by that, probably one of the stupidest decisions in this movie, is the scene where Nicolas Cage's character, Malus, approaches that field of beehives, and we find out that he's allergic to bees. And, you know, instead of running away from the field, instead he just runs forward into the field and gets stung a bunch more. Now, admittedly, I'm not allergic to bees, but if I was, just sprinting into that field with all the bees is probably the last thing that I want to do.
Again, no. If you watch this movie as a straight up horror movie, it's incoherent. It makes no damn sense. It's overacted to all hell by everybody, not just Nicolas Cage. There's overacting across the board. But if you watch it as what it truly is, which is just a screwball comedy, you will have the time of your life and you will have the biggest smile on your face.
Yeah, pretty much. But moving on from The Wicker Man, coming in at number four on our list is going to be A Nightmare on Elm Street from 2010. And if you've been following our channel for a while, you'll know that Andrew and I were big fans of the original Nightmare on Elm Street, and I think that's part of what makes this movie, you know, hurt a little bit more, right, Andrew?
Yes, one of many bad horror movies made by Platinum Dunes.
Well, and with this remake, I think that there was a lot of wasted potential here because one of the biggest areas where I think there was wasted potential was Jackie Earle Haley. And Andrew, I know your feelings about this, but I think Jackie Earle Haley did the best that he could as Freddy with what he had, and he tried to make it work, which I appreciated. And while I do appreciate that this movie sticks to the scary and menacing version of Freddy instead of the more goofy and comedic side, unfortunately, no one will ever play Freddy as great as Robert Englund.
No, no. This is Freddy Krueger is and always will be Robert Englund. Robert Englund has it down to a science. And as much as I love Jackie Earle Haley, he can play a very good bad guy, very creepy bad guy. I just don't think he quite connects as Freddy. Like he's got the menace down, but I don't know what he's missing.
And you know what's too bad though? This movie actually has a pretty decent cast. Apart from Jackie Earle Haley, who I've always liked, you got Rooney Mara, who I also like. There's the great Clancy Brown in this movie. You also got people like Katie Cassidy and maybe Connie Britton. But unfortunately, all the characters that they're playing are so bland and devoid of human emotion. I mean, everyone is just kind of mumbling and hesitating through all their lines. A lot of them look like they don't really want to be there. And I think that was actually the case with some of the actors, but conversation for another time. And they're just nowhere near as fun to follow as the characters in the original film.
Yeah. Again, I don't know if it's all down to the direction or the writing or just the fact that they were trying to remake something that many people already consider perfect. That is a very hard thing to pull off.
And also, when it comes to how this movie recreates the story of Nightmare on Elm Street, it introduces the possibility that Freddy was actually innocent, which I have never been a fan of. I think that was a huge mistake for two reasons. First off, the movie tries to create this whole mystery surrounding whether or not Freddy might have been wronged, which wasn't in the original. And at the end, it just feels pretty pointless because in the third act, all this kind of gets thrown out the window because we find out, actually, yeah, he was guilty, so none of that really matters.
Yeah, that's a plot point I hate in this movie and in other movies that pull the, hey, this whole, hour of the movie you've been paying attention to. Yeah, that was all literally for nothing. He was guilty the whole time, or our plans already succeeded. You failed the mission kind of thing. I hate that because I find it to be such a waste of time and such a slap in the face kind of plot twist.
Well, and also, here's the thing. When it comes to the whole situation with Freddy when he was alive and when he was a gardener who lived in the basement at this school, you see that he has this fondness for all the kids and he's kind of just very attached to them. They even mention at one point, hey, Nancy, you were his favorite. And the parents don't start getting suspicious until after the kids tell them all these stories. They start acting weird or they show up with scratches. Okay, so you're telling me that it took until that point for the parents to take action on things? Did no one think that this grown man living in the basement who has this weird attachment with all the kids was just a big red flag to begin with?
Yeah, also a pretty damn big plot hole.
Also, another big problem with this movie, and that is the fact that they ditched the whole concept of Freddy being a child killer and instead they just make him this predator who assaulted all these kids. Okay, so here's the thing though. If that's his whole backstory before he was killed and eventually became the Master of Dreams, if that's it, then why did he need claws? Because when they go into his room in the basement of that school, they find the claws on his desk or something. So if he wasn't a killer, then why does he need claws? And also another thing, if the basement is where he committed all his crimes, then why is there a boiler room in all the dream sequences? Because in the original, it actually had a purpose, The reason we saw the boiler room is because that's where he would take his victims, but instead, that's not what he did. Instead, it was at the basement. So why is there a boiler room in the dreams?
Yeah, and also, if he was innocent, why wouldn't he just be attacking the parents that killed him? Why would he be focused on their kids if he didn't have that experience beforehand? And as for making him that kind of villain in this movie that he never was explicitly in the original, it's never stated. I just find that to be a really gross addition because it's added just for the sake, in my opinion, just for the sake of it. Again, Freddy's a pop culture icon, so are you really trying to tarnish the legacy of that pop culture icon?
Yeah, I've never liked that direction either. But one final issue with this movie, jump scares. And what I've come to realize about this as I've gotten older, I don't necessarily hate jump scares. I hate constant jump scares. And that's exactly what this movie is. It seems like that's what it relies most on to be scary. You got so many jump scares in this movie. It's just jump scare, jump scare, jump scare, jump scare, jump scare. If that's all that a movie relies on to be scary, then that's really going to take me out of it.
Yeah, it's, as you mentioned, I hate bad jump scares, but I hate overused jump scares too. And this movie has both, especially compared to how creepy the original Nightmare on Elm Street is. And yes, it had jump scares in it, but it also had just scares.
It had a creepy atmosphere. It had a scary villain. It was just a genuinely scary film.
It had a very unique feel to it too, because all these people are being killed in their dreams. That's something you can't escape from. We as humans, we need to sleep. We reach a point where if we stay up too long, our bodies literally shut down and force us to sleep. It's literally an inescapable realm.
Yeah, exactly. But now that we've talked about Nightmare on Elm Street, coming in at number 3 on our list, we have Prom Night from 2008.
Oh my God. So to give our listeners a little bit of backstory on this one, Kate and I did a double feature of bad horror remakes that I had not seen, but he had for this video because we had been talking about doing this one for a long time. So we did Prom Night and then we did what came in at the number 2 spot, which we'll get to in a few minutes. But my God, did I hate Prom Night from 2008. Now, I will admit, I have only seen the original from the 80s maybe twice. It didn't leave that much of an impression on me, but it has to be better than this mess.
Yeah, and admittedly, I've never been a big fan of the original Prom Night from 1980. I mean, I think it's a decent slasher movie overall. You know, you have a killer seeking revenge on this group of characters who were responsible for the death of their friend years prior. But when you get to this remake, does it recreate that story in an interesting or unique way? No, not really. Instead, it just becomes about a psychotic teacher who escapes from prison and he's obsessed with one of his students and he decides he's just going to kill all her friends on their prom night until he gets to her. To me, not a great way to reimagine the story. And also, one of the biggest sins that this movie makes is that it's just not scary at all. The villain isn't scary, the atmosphere isn't unsettling, none of the jump scares are effective in any way.
I have multiple things I need to talk about with how bad this movie is. So let's start with maybe my biggest problem, the killer in this movie. The killer in this movie, as Kate mentioned, is a psychotic teacher who has developed this violent obsession with one of his former students. His name is Richard Fenton. He killed her family, and now he's escaped prison, and now he's after her because he wants her so bad. So on paper, not the worst idea for a slasher killer, but then he shows up on screen. And what ultra creative, creepy design did they create for this character? A guy that looks like every English teacher joke you've ever heard. Brown shoes, brown khakis, 5 o'clock shadow, a brown tux jacket with a shirt, and a blank black baseball cap, and a perpetual facial expression of he just farted and can't figure out if the entire room heard it or not. I have never seen a less intimidating horror movie character. The plants from The Happening are more terrifying than this guy.
And on top of everything, he also has an odd ability to teleport.
He really can, because there is physically no way that he would have been able to get out of the hotel room after he attacks the final girl, sneak back to his own hotel room, put the body of the bellhop up in the vents, change clothes, and escape down with him with the rest of the staff without literally being able to teleport.
Yeah, and also, apart from the killer, I don't get what this movie's whole obsession is with that closet in the hotel suite.
Oh my, yeah.
Because, I mean, we see Donna open it at one point, and then we see her friend Claire open it, followed by her boyfriend Michael, who gets attacked by Fenton when he pops out of the closet. Donna even uses it again when she checks to see if anyone's in there. I mean, we just keep opening this closet and ending up inside it. I don't get why this movie loves this closet so much.
It's not even that good of a shot. It's somebody opening a closet. I think it's used in 1, maybe 2 kills. I don't get what the director's obsession with this shot was. It's not even that clever of a shot. We've seen killers jump out of closets since the 80s.
Yeah, and also just getting into the cast and characters with this movie. Among these people, we have Idris Elba. And, you know, Andrew, for what it's worth, Idris Elba is probably the best thing about the movie.
Oh, Idris Elba acts circles around everybody in this movie. But he is possibly the least effective horror movie cop I've ever seen, because he gets word that a psychotic stalker has escaped. And what does he do?
Not much.
Not much. He goes to Donna's prom and he just awkwardly watches from the sidelines looking like a creep. Yes, he goes to the front desk of the hotel and is like, have you seen this man? No, we haven't. Do you have pictures of him? Maybe he might have shaved. Does he grab Donna and her boyfriend and put them into protective custody so he can keep her safe? No. Does he send police to her hotel room that they could have easily checked and seen that they were staying the night there? No, this is maybe the least effective of police officer in horror history, and that is saying something.
And also, when it comes to the other characters in this movie, anytime I go back to it, I genuinely keep forgetting all their names. The only way I can remember is when the characters refer to each other by names, and even that isn't really enough. We don't get enough time to get attached to any of these guys, and their personalities are almost non-existent. I mean, there's even a scene in the movie where the character Ronnie is about to propose to his girlfriend Lisa right before she dies, and a scene like that I think could have been effective, but the problem is we don't really care about any of these characters, so you can't get invested in anything that's happening with them.
Yes, because they missed the very first step of introducing characters, of giving them character. Literally, I can't tell you what one character's motivation is compared to the others. It's literally just, oh, they're friends and it's the day of prom. Fascinating. So that's Prom Night from 2008. And somehow we got 2 more entries on this list.
Well, with that, Andrew, let's move on to number 2 on our list, and that is going to be The Fog from 2005.
This was the other half of the terrible double feature.
Now, the original The Fog by John Carpenter is not just a good horror movie, but it's also just a good ghost story in general. And part of what made the original work so well, apart from the concept and obviously John Carpenter's direction, was the practical effects that brought the fog to life. It brought a certain level of authenticity to the movie, if you know what I mean. But then, when you get to this remake and all the digital fog effects that are used instead basically squash that, because taking out that authenticity, the movie basically takes away a big part of what made the original film scary. And I mean, if you're losing what made the original scary and essentially losing what it was, then all I'll say is you got a big problem there.
Yeah, I've seen N64 fog that looks more convincing than whatever the blue hell they were using for this movie.
Well, and also, apart from the fog effects, one big issue that we had, I know you definitely had, was the editing in this movie.
Oh my God, the editing. There's a lot of very choppy, like, why would you cut their edits? But for me, the worst example is they're doing the flashback to the founders of the town robbing the leper colony. The founders literally, have pulled out their guns and it's like, hey, we're here to take it all. And it's almost like you can almost see the actor's mouth opening to deliver another line. Cut back to the present day. What? Why would you not just do the entire flashback?
Also, one thing that John Carpenter does really well with a lot of his movies is getting us attached to the characters, and I'd say he does a decent job with that in the original. But getting into this movie, Andrew, question, did you like any of the characters in this movie?
No, genuinely, because much like Prom Night, they forgot the very important step of making them actual characters. These are a bunch of horror movie stereotypes. You've got the doofus pot smokers. You've got the doofus best friend. You got the alcoholic pastor. You got the dumb blonde. You got the old lady. Like, this isn't a cast of characters. This is just a cast of cliches.
Yeah, and unfortunately, because of that, because of how bland and forgettable all these characters are, you can't really root for anyone, and that's an issue with a lot of horror films in general. And I don't want to blame this on the actors, because, they're just doing what the script said. But yeah, the acting and the characters, it's definitely one of the weakest elements of this movie. In fact, one of the characters in this is played by Tom Welling, aka Clark Kent himself from Smallville. And he even admitted in his podcast with Michael Rosenbaum that he thought the movie was horrible because, just like we feel, it lost everything that made the original movie scary. So, I mean, credit to him for being honest about that.
Yeah, I mean, admitting when something is wrong or when you're wrong or when you've made something bad is not easy to do. So I will give him credit for that. But my God, does he play a complete nothing of a pretty boy character in this? Okay, so I need to talk, not the biggest issue with this movie, because that's the ending, and we'll get to that in a minute. I need to talk about just how stupid some of these dialogue lines are. These are actual honest-to-God lines that are in this movie. Women have testicular telepathy. To let that marinate for a second. Women have testicular telepathy. Another one. The ghosts couldn't get in the freezer. Ghosts, incorporeal beings that walk through walls, can't get in the freezer. We from Chicago, in apropos of nothing that was being discussed. And finally, almost the closing line to the movie. Something did come back from the sea. Sooner or later, everything does. I did not realize that everything that enters the sea comes back eventually. Thank you for this brilliant, breathtaking discovery. And This is just me being a uppity marine biologist. The coral effects in this movie on the relics that the people and various people end up finding, like the pocket watch and the mirror, looks so bad and so fake. Coral is calcified. It looks like plaster of Paris. It looks like rock. It does not look like plastic. These look like children's toys level of bad effects.
Yeah, and unfortunately, apart from that, this is also just another horror film where we're faced with characters who just constantly make stupid decisions. One thing that bugged me most was when you see the old man on the beach with the metal detector, he finds the rope, he just starts pulling on it, and it just starts taking him into the water. He gets deeper, and even though the waves start getting more intense, he still keeps pulling on it. He just keeps going in until the ghosts eventually get him. Okay, even if that wasn't the case, even if the town wasn't surrounded by this fog with all the ghosts, why exactly did he do that? Was he trying to die? Was he trying to just go in there and drown?
That is one of the many stupid decisions in this movie.
There's even the scene where Stevie's son uses scotch tape to try to block out the fog. And I know that he's just a kid, but did you really think that that was going to work?
There is so much wrong with this movie. Let's talk about the fact that there's also a love triangle, kind of, between Nick, Elizabeth, and Stevie.
Which wasn't in the original. It was created specifically for this movie.
And it's hinted at, and it's talked about, but it literally adds nothing to the plot. I don't even think it's brought up again after, the first introduction. Why was it included is even my question. But now, of all of the stupid plot holes and moments, we have to talk about the granddaddy of them all. We have to talk about the ending. Okay, so as it's revealed very clunkily, the plot is the founders of this town basically sold some of their island that they lived on to this leper colony that wanted to basically have a home for themselves before they all die. The founders then double-cross the lepers, steal all of their money, and then kill them. Okay. So the lepers come back as ghosts haunting the descendants of the founders. That's all making sense so far. They want revenge. So naturally, you think, they're going to have to either claim their land to leave the townsfolk at peace, or they're going to have to kill everybody to achieve their revenge. No! What happens is Elizabeth walks up to the ghost of the leader of the leper colony, kisses him, becomes a ghost, and then the leper colonies disappear. It's hinted at during the course of the movie that something with Elizabeth, she can remember things, but they don't ever indicate that she's a descendant of his lost wife or she has to do this. It's literally a left turn for the sake of a left turn. The lepers don't get what they wanted. They didn't kill the townsfolk. They didn't get their land that they were owed. I genuinely, to this day, and I watched this weeks ago, can't wrap my head around what the blue hell this ending was supposed to be. A head scratcher is putting it too nicely. This movie is horrendous. And yet, we have one more entry.
That's right. Now that we've talked about The Fog, coming in at number 1 on our list, we have Psycho from 1998.
Why? Just why?
So for anyone who might not know about this movie, this is a actual shot-for-shot remake of the original from 1960. And this movie is directed by Gus Van Sant. For anyone who might not know, Gus Van Sant is probably most famous for directing films such as Good Will Hunting. And when he was approached to remake this movie, it was his idea to do a shot-for-shot remake, which was actually something that even confused the studio at the time. And according to Gus Van Sant himself, the reason behind this was because he wanted to use the movie as an experiment to demonstrate that no one can really copy a film exactly the same way as the original. And I'm pretty sure everyone could have figured that out already.
Yeah, again, much like we talked about with Nightmare on Elm Street, why are you remaking something that's already perfect?
And I'm someone who generally doesn't like the idea of shot-for-shot remakes in general. I mean, if you're going to remake something, at least do something different. That's one of the things I liked about the final season of Bates Motel, actually, how it reimagined the story of Psycho in a different way. This, on the other hand, just feels completely pointless. It's basically the same movie as the original, just way less effective and in color.
Yeah, let's talk about the fact that, oh my God, this movie does not... Doing Psycho in color for me is like watching It's a Wonderful Life in color. It feels so wrong and gives such an uncanny valley vibe.
Yeah, I agree. That is one of my favorite things about the original Psycho, how it's in black and white. But unfortunately, this movie, despite being shot for shot, you don't have the same level of thrill and suspense that the original captured. I mean, obviously, Alfred Hitchcock, the master of suspense, I guess that makes sense why. But getting into this movie, we need to talk about one of my biggest issues and also one of yours, and that is Vince Vaughn as Norman Bates. Now, Andrew, just real quick, I want to start off by saying that I do like Vince Vaughn. You know, I've liked him. I've liked him in comedic roles like Wedding Crashers or even more dramatic roles like Hacksaw Ridge. You know, the dude does know how to act.
I agree. He's not one of my favorite actors, and I think comedy is his strong suit. But as you mentioned, like Hacksaw Ridge, Assault in, what is it, Cell Block 17 from a few years ago, he can do drama. I think he's somebody who needs a good director and a good script to do drama, but he can do drama.
But unfortunately, he's just not Norman Bates.
No, he is not. And let's talk about maybe the biggest issue, which is the overacting he does.
Yeah, because with Anthony Perkins in the original, the thing that he did so well was he brought a very harmless presence to Norman. You know, you need that presence so you can mask the insanity that's hiding beneath it. Because when you met Norman in the original, you know, he was socially awkward and he seemed a little strange, but again, he seemed totally harmless. And that's exactly what you need from Norman. You know, you need someone who, when you show up at this motel, you need someone who seems approachable, you know, but you can't really get that with Vince Vaughn as Norman Bates. Instead, he just comes off as crazy right from the start, and he's always just giggling and laughing the entire time. I'll tell you right now, Andrew, if I stopped at a motel and it was being run by this guy, I'm getting back in my car and I'm going to find somewhere else to stay.
Yeah, this Vince Vaughn's performance is just straight out and out a serial killer. The second you lay eyes on this guy, the second you talk to this guy, you know he is going to kill you. Weirdly, the vibe he gets is that he's going to eat you too.
Yeah, pretty much.
Like he gives like Ed Gein vibes, whereas you mentioned Anthony Perkins was creepy, but he also kind of had that way of like presenting innocence. Like if you didn't know his background or his horrific crimes, you would get the vibe of, oh, he's a bit strange, but he's innocent. There's clearly something going on, but I don't think he's going to hurt me. I feel safe being in the same room as him.
And unfortunately, the acting in general in this movie is a huge issue. And, you know, I brought this up when we were revisiting this just for this ranking. There's such little energy in the performances in this movie, which is something that just always takes me out of a movie in general. And that's really too bad because, I mean, you have really great actors in this movie. You got Julianne Moore, Viggo Mortensen, William H. Macy, and unfortunately, no one in this movie is as effective as the performances that we saw in the original.
Yeah, no, it's almost like everybody took 3 Ambien before going in front of the camera. It's like nobody's got any energy. Nobody's got any like life to their performance.
Yeah, especially Anne Heche as Marion Crane. Marion Crane in this movie is nowhere near as compelling or as easy to root for as she was in the original, where she was played by Janet Leigh. And when you have the section of the movie where Marion finds the Bates Motel, that is one of the most important parts of the entire movie, in my opinion, of the original. And part of why it's so important, you know, apart from Marion's death, is because of her interactions with Norman. And this goes for when they first meet, to their conversation in the office where Norman is telling her about his mother. A big part of why those interactions worked so well in the original is because of Anthony Perkins and Janet Leigh. Apart from how great their acting was, both of them played off each other so incredibly well, and you were so invested in their conversations, and that's part of what made it effective. You don't get that with Vince Vaughn and Anne Heche. Again, Vince Vaughn is really overacting, and Anne Heche just really seems pretty bored throughout the whole thing, so you can't get invested in what's happening between the two of them.
Yeah, when you have overacting combined with underacting, you're not going to get a very enthralling conversation. You're going to get somebody chewing the scenery and somebody falling asleep.
Yeah, and apart from the interactions between them, everything else that this movie tries to recreate from the original, you know, as a shot-for-shot remake is just nowhere near as effective in any way. And this goes for the shower scene, the most iconic scene in the entire movie, or even the moment where Marion spots Mother in the window, or the scenes where she's driving in the car, or the reveal later on where we find out that Norman's actually the killer, which in my opinion, like I said in our review of that, is one of the best plot twists in cinematic history. When we get to how they do it in this movie, it just really comes off as more of a parody, or in your words, a failed parody.
It feels very try-hardy in this one. The reveal that Mother is dead and that Norman is playing her is, in the original, is actually quite simple. His mother's corpse is sat in the chair in the root cellar, facing the wall, and then turned around and it's revealed that it's a decaying corpse. And then Norman jumps out dressed as Mother. In this one, Norman's mother is sat behind a plastic screen in like an aviary, where then she spun around. You see it's a dead body, and then Vince Vaughn, wearing a very unconvincing blonde wig, jumps out and then is immediately taken down. It feels like it's trying to be too artistic, where it's like, oh, he put his mother with the birds because he's done the same thing to her that he's done to the animals, kind of thing. It's very much the man in the red chair. It's very much ask me what it means.
Yeah, and I think that's a big part of why we put this at number one, because of all five of these, this one just totally feels the most pointless, in my opinion, because of the fact that it's a shot for shot remake. The acting isn't as effective. The shots aren't as effective, even though it's shot for shot. The music isn't as effective. Nothing works as well as it did with the original. And again, going back to how it was supposed to be an experiment, that nothing can be remade exactly the same. Okay, well, again, I think we would already know that even if this movie hadn't happened.
I used the analogy, and I forget who told me this one, which is it's like taking a Rolex, burying it in the dirt for 5 years, and then pulling it out. It's still a Rolex, so it's still technically a great watch, but now it's rusted and tarnished and destroyed.
And I think a big part of why this movie doesn't work as a remake is the execution of how the original changes genres halfway through the runtime. And I brought this up before with the original Psycho, but one of the things I've always loved about that movie, which I think you like too, is how the first half sort of acts as this sort of thriller slash road trip story for Marion Crane as she goes on the run after stealing all the money. And then when she finds the Bates Motel and you get the iconic shower scene, the movie automatically flips and turns into a horror film. But with this remake, that sudden change doesn't really feel as impactful or as natural. And this is because the suspense and thrills from the original aren't present in the movie. The tone isn't as strong. The music isn't as compelling. You're also just not as invested in any of the characters because there's such little energy with what they're doing. So that's a big part that the story gets wrong with this movie.
Yeah. Why do it in the first place? Like, the studio was confused as to why Gus Van Sant did this in the first place. Why try to remake something that's already considered perfect?
Because, Andrew, you actually finally got the opportunity to see the original Psycho last year when we reviewed it. Wasn't that movie awesome?
Yes, and it's still very creepy and very eerie.
And it still holds up to this day.
And okay, this is going back to something we mentioned quite a few minutes ago, but I think I figured out why watching this in color is such a downgrade. It takes away some of the natural eeriness, specifically the Bates house, in my opinion, because in the original, it's mostly cloaked in shadow. So yes, you can see it's this big, almost kind of gothic house, but it's mostly bathed in shadow. So it's like, oh, what is truly up there? Whereas when you see it in color, it just looks like a slightly run down house. And that takes away all of the creepiness.
With this movie, you don't really have too much of a difference between the house and the motel in terms of how they're presented. Because in the original, the motel feels very warm and cozy and welcoming, but the house is supposed to seem like Dracula could live up there. It just looks like this eerie haunted house, but you don't really get that vibe when you watch this remake.
No, you did not. And God, doing this video has made me very tired.
All right. Well, with that, I guess we'll have to wrap this up. Guys, thank you so much for listening to our ranking. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you all again very soon.